Imagine digging a hole so deep into the earth that the rock around you is naturally hot enough to kill you within minutes, just from the ambient heat alone. Now imagine sending thousands of workers down there every single day, in elevators that take 20 minutes just to reach the bottom, running industrial-scale refrigeration systems around the clock just to keep the air breathable, and constantly guarding against the ever-present risk of collapse in rock under crushing pressure. This isn't a disaster scenario. This is a normal shift at the world's deepest mine, and the bill behind it will make you rethink where the gold in your jewelry actually comes from. Most people picture a mine as a hole in the ground with a bucket and a pickaxe, maybe a support beam or two. The reality, at the depths where some of the world's richest gold deposits actually sit, is closer to operating a small city that happens to exist vertically, several kilometers beneath the surface, in an environment that is actively, physically trying to kill everyone inside it. Some of the deepest mines on Earth reach depths of over 4 kilometers below the surface, and at that depth, the Earth's own geothermal gradient means the surrounding rock can reach temperatures over 60 degrees Celsius, hot enough to cause fatal heat stroke in a matter of minutes, without constant, massive mechanical intervention. Let's start with the single biggest and most surprising cost in ultra-deep mining: cooling. As you go deeper into the Earth, temperature rises steadily due to natural geothermal heat, and at depths beyond 3 or 4 kilometers, that heat becomes genuinely lethal without intervention. To make these mines survivable for human workers, operators build refrigeration plants on a scale that's difficult to comprehend, essentially massive industrial air conditioning systems, capable of chilling enormous volumes of air and then pumping that cooled air down through the mine's ventilation shafts continuously, 24 hours a day, every single day the mine operates. Some of these refrigeration plants are large enough to cool an amount of air equivalent to what would be needed for a significant portion of a city, and building that infrastructure alone can cost hundreds of millions of dollars, before counting the electricity required to run it continuously, forever, for as long as the mine remains operational. Here's the detail that catches people off guard. This cooling system isn't a one-time installation that quietly runs in the background. As a mine gets deeper over the years, chasing valuable ore further into the earth, the cooling demand increases because deeper rock is hotter rock. Mining companies have to continuously expand and upgrade their refrigeration capacity as operations progress, which means the cooling infrastructure itself becomes an ongoing capital expense that never really finishes, growing in scale and cost as the mine chases valuable deposits deeper and deeper underground. Now let's talk about getting people and equipment in and out, because at these depths, this is a genuinely complex engineering problem in its own right. Workers descend using massive elevator systems called cages, capable of moving dozens of people at a time, but even at significant speed, reaching a working face 4 kilometers underground can take 20 minutes or more, one way. Multiply that by thousands of workers moving in and out of the mine across multiple daily shifts, and you start to understand why some deep mines actually operate multiple separate shaft systems, essentially parallel vertical highways, just to keep enough people and equipment moving efficiently without creating dangerous bottlenecks at a single access point. Building and maintaining each of these shaft systems, with their associated cable systems, safety mechanisms, and structural reinforcement, represents an enormous fixed cost, independent of how much ore is actually being extracted that day. Let's talk about ventilation, because breathable air at these depths doesn't happen naturally. It has to be actively engineered and continuously maintained. Beyond just temperature, deep underground environments can accumulate dangerous gases and depleted oxygen levels if air isn't constantly circulated. Mines at this depth run massive ventilation systems, essentially giant fan networks moving enormous volumes of fresh air down into the mine while simultaneously extracting stale air back to the surface. And this entire system has to run continuously, because even a brief ventilation failure at these depths can become a life-threatening emergency within minutes. Now let's talk about the risk of ground movement, because this is the danger that keeps mining engineers awake at night. At extreme depths, the surrounding rock is under enormous pressure from the weight of everything above it, and as tunnels get carved out of that rock, the remaining structure can shift, crack, or in worst cases, violently collapse in events the industry calls rockbursts, where built-up stress in the rock releases suddenly and explosively, sometimes with force comparable to a small earthquake. Managing this risk requires constant geological monitoring, seismic sensors placed throughout the mine that listen for the telltale signs of stress building in the rock, and engineering teams who have to make real-time decisions about which areas are safe to work in and which need to be reinforced or evacuated. Preventing rockbursts, or at least managing where and when they occur, requires specialized support structures, additional reinforcement, and sometimes deliberately controlled smaller releases of pressure, all of which adds cost and complexity that simply doesn't exist in shallower, less dangerous mining operations. Let's talk about the workforce, because working at these depths, under these conditions, requires specialized training and, often, specialized compensation to attract and retain workers willing to do this job day after day. Every worker descending into a mine at this depth needs extensive safety training specific to the extreme heat, ventilation risks, and rockburst potential of ultra-deep mining, and mining companies typically employ large dedicated safety and rescue teams, specialists trained specifically to respond to underground emergencies at depths where a rescue operation itself can take hours just due to the sheer distance involved. These rescue teams, along with the specialized equipment they maintain, represent another permanent operational cost that exists purely to manage risk, generating no ore extraction value on its own. If you're fascinated by what it actually takes to keep the world's most extreme industrial operations running, hit subscribe, because every week we break down the hidden operational reality behind the world's most complex and dangerous systems. Let's talk about electricity, because an operation this large, running massive refrigeration and ventilation systems continuously at significant depth, consumes an enormous amount of power. Some of the world's deepest mines rank among the largest individual electricity consumers in their entire region, requiring dedicated power infrastructure and, in some cases, their own substation connections to the regional electrical grid just to meet demand. That electricity bill runs continuously, whether the mine is having a productive day of ore extraction or dealing with an operational slowdown, because the cooling and ventilation systems can never simply be turned off without risking the safety of everyone still underground. Let's talk about what happens when the ore price drops, because this is where the fixed cost structure of ultra-deep mining becomes genuinely dangerous from a business perspective. Unlike a surface mine, where operations can be scaled up or down relatively easily in response to market prices, an ultra-deep mine's cooling, ventilation, and shaft infrastructure represents an enormous sunk cost that continues generating expense regardless of commodity prices. If gold prices fall significantly, a deep mine can find itself in a position where continuing to operate at a loss is still cheaper than the alternative, because completely shutting down and later restarting a mine at this depth, including redeveloping ventilation and dealing with potential ground stability changes during the closure, can cost more than simply operating through a difficult pricing period and hoping for a recovery. Let's put a full year together, because that's where the real scale becomes clear. Between continuous cooling and ventilation operations, ongoing shaft maintenance and safety infrastructure, dedicated rescue and safety personnel, massive electricity consumption, and the specialized workforce required to operate safely at these depths, the annual operating cost for a major ultra-deep mine can run into the hundreds of millions of dollars, independent of the actual extraction, processing, and transportation costs associated with turning raw ore into a sellable commodity. And unlike many industrial operations, almost none of these safety-related costs are optional or reducible without directly increasing risk to human life underground. So why does anyone operate a mine this expensive, this dangerous, and this operationally relentless? Because at these depths, mining companies are often accessing some of the richest, highest-grade ore deposits remaining on the planet, deposits that simply don't exist any closer to the surface because they've already been extracted by previous generations of less capable mining technology. The economics work specifically because the ore grade at these depths can be significantly higher than what remains in shallower, already depleted deposits, meaning each ton of rock extracted yields enough valuable material to justify the enormous fixed costs of keeping the operation safe and functional at extreme depth. So the next time you see a piece of gold jewelry, remember what it might have taken to bring that material to the surface. You're looking at the potential result of a mine reaching over 4 kilometers underground, industrial refrigeration plants running continuously to keep the air survivable, massive ventilation systems constantly cycling breathable air through kilometers of tunnel, seismic monitoring systems listening for the warning signs of rock under crushing pressure, and thousands of workers descending daily into an environment that would kill them within minutes if a single one of those systems ever truly failed. The ring is small. The mind behind it never stops working. Disclaimer: this content is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Operational costs are estimates based on available data.